He wrote this letter 2,000 years ago. It reads like he's watching your screen time right now. No exaggeration, no clickbait. I want you to sit with that for a second. A man who died in 65 AD, who never held a smartphone, never opened a browser, never felt the pull of an infinite scroll, wrote a warning so precise, so surgical, so uncomfortably accurate about the way you are spending your hours, that reading it today feels less like history and more like surveillance. His name was Lucius Annaeus Seneca, philosopher, playwright, statesman, advisor to emperors, one of the wealthiest men in Rome. And in the final years of his life, he sat down and wrote a short essay, barely 20 pages, that he titled De Brevitate Vitae, on the shortness of life. And in it, he made a claim so radical that it has never fully stopped being controversial in the 2,000 years since he put it to paper. He said, "Life is not short. Life is long. More than long enough, more than sufficient, for every meaningful thing a human being could want to do or become or experience. The problem," he said, "is not the length of life. The problem is the waste of it." And he described the waste in terms so specific, so particular in their anatomy, that you will recognize yourself in every single one. Not a past version of yourself, not a cautionary tale about other people. Yourself, right now, this week. That's what we're unpacking today. The full Senecan indictment of modern life, made in antiquity, delivered to you now, and more importantly, the prescription he left alongside it. Because Seneca didn't just diagnose the problem, he left a map out. Let's walk it. Before we get to Seneca's specific warnings, I need to paint you a picture. Imagine a thief, but not the kind that breaks in at night and takes your laptop. A different kind. This thief takes nothing you can see missing, takes nothing you can insure or replace or report. This thief reaches into your life and takes the one thing you will never, ever get back, and leaves no trace, no receipt, no evidence, no timestamp. This thief takes your hours, not in one dramatic heist, in 1,000 tiny transactions you consented to without knowing what you were agreeing to. The 20 minutes you spent reading comments on a post that upset you, gone. The hour you spent watching videos you don't even remember watching, gone. The 3 hours on Sunday you planned to use for something that mattered, gone, consumed by a vague, unstructured restlessness that never resolved into anything. And at the end of the week, at the end of the year, you look back and you feel it. That particular flavor of unease that is not quite guilt and not quite grief, but lives somewhere between them. The feeling that time passed, that you were in it, but somehow not with it. Seneca had a name for this state. He called it Dissipatio, dissipation, the scattering of life across 1,000 trivial things until there is no coherent self left to account for any of it. And here is the paragraph from On the Shortness of Life that I want you to hear. Not as an ancient text, but as a message sent directly to this moment. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last, by death's final constraint, to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. Read it again. Before we knew it was passing. Not before it ended. Before we even knew it was passing. That is the specific horror Seneca is pointing at. Not death. Not even the shortness of life. the invisibility of its passage, the way an hour can be gone before you registered it as an hour, the way a year can close before you experienced it as a year. You didn't lose those hours to anything dramatic. You lost them to the low-grade, entirely voluntary, completely invisible consumption of your own attention. And the tragedy, the specific Senecan tragedy, is that most people will reach the end of their lives not feeling robbed. They'll feel confused. Where did it go? I was just here. I was just young. I had so many plans. This is the problem Seneca is diagnosing. And it is not a problem of bad luck or cruel fate or the indifferent passage of time. It is a problem of allocation, of choosing every day 1,000 times what gets your most non-renewable resource, and choosing badly, reflexively, without intention. That's the setup. Now let's go deeper. In On the Shortness of Life, Seneca identified 3 specific types of people, 3 archetypes of wasted existence. And I want you to be honest with yourself as I describe them, because most of us live inside at least one of these, and many of us cycle through all 3. Category 1, the busy. Of all people, only those are at leisure who make time for philosophy. Only those are really alive. The first category, and perhaps the most insidious because it wears the most respectable disguise, is the person who is always busy. Not the lazy person, not the distracted person, the busy person. The person whose calendar is always full, whose inbox is always urgent, who is always in the middle of something, always needed somewhere, always just about to get to the thing that matters as soon as they get through the thing that doesn't. Seneca reserved some of his sharpest prose for this person, because this person believes, genuinely, sincerely believes, that they are making good use of their life. They mistake motion for direction. They mistake activity for purpose. They mistake the feeling of being needed with the experience of being alive. Here's the question Seneca poses, and it is devastating. Busy with what? If you stripped away the busyness, stripped away the meetings and the messages and the tasks and the obligations, and asked the honest question, at the end of this, what will I have built? Who will I have become? What will I have understood? What's the answer? For many people, the answer is nothing. Not nothing dramatic, just nothing their own. Their busyness has served other people's agendas, other people's timelines, other people's visions. They have been useful, endlessly, exhaustingly useful, and they have arrived at the end of their usefulness with nothing internal to show for it. Seneca called this aliena vivere, living for others, not in the noble sense of service or love, in the hollow sense of having never located the center of your own existence because you were always too occupied with the periphery of someone else's. Does this land for anyone? Category 2, the postponer. This is the one that will hit hardest for the 20 to 35 crowd, though it has no age limit. I've met 70-year-old postponers who still believe the real chapter is about to start. Seneca writes, Omnia, Lucili, aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything, Lucilius, belongs to others. Time alone is ours. And then he describes a type of person whose entire psychological architecture is built on the future, whose present is always a staging area for a life they haven't started yet, whose real living is perpetually scheduled for later. When I finish this degree, I'll focus on what matters. When I get the promotion, I'll have time for the relationship. When the kids are older, I'll start creating. When I retire, I'll finally live. You know this voice. You may be living inside it right now. Seneca's diagnosis is precise and merciless. The postponer is not being robbed by circumstance. The postponer is voluntarily placing their life in escrow, deferring the experience of being fully alive to a future moment that by the time it arrives will have been replaced by another future moment. And here is the cruelty of this trap. The postponer often has excellent reasons for postponing. Real obligations, real constraints, real pressures. But Seneca is not interested in whether the reasons are good. He's interested in a different question. What are you waiting to become? And are you becoming it in any way, however small right now? Because the future is not a place you arrive at. It is a place you build, or don't, in the 10-minute increments of today. The postponer who waits for retirement to be curious will not suddenly become curious at 65. Curiosity is a muscle. It atrophies like all muscles. The person who defers their becoming always discovers, too late, that they have also deferred their capacity to become. That is Seneca's warning to the postponer, not hurry up, not time is running out. But the person you are waiting to become is being made, or unmade, right now in this moment, by the choices you are making or refusing to make. Category 3, the pleasure seeker. Before I describe this one, I want to be careful, because Seneca was not a Puritan, and this is not a lecture about self-denial. The pleasure seeker Seneca is warning against is not the person who enjoys their life. It is the person who has replaced their life with the experience of enjoyment. The distinction is everything. There is a kind of pleasure that is life-giving, that connects you to your senses, to other people, to the texture of being alive. A long dinner with people you love. A piece of music that hits something real. A walk at dusk that turns into an hour you didn't plan. These are not waste. These are exactly what life is for. But there is another kind of pleasure, and the modern world serves it in industrial quantities, that is not enjoyment. It is anesthesia. It numbs without nourishing. It stimulates without satisfying. It passes the time without filling it. Seneca describes the pleasure seeker who moves from stimulation to stimulation, novelty to novelty, consumption to consumption. And at the end of the day, the week, the decade, finds themselves strangely, inexplicably empty. Not because they didn't enjoy themselves, but because enjoyment, used as a substitute for meaning, leaves a different kind of hunger than it found. This is the person who has watched more hours of content in the past year than they've spent on anything they would describe as important, who has consumed more opinions than they've formed, who has followed more lives than they've built. Seneca's prescription here is not abstinence. It is discrimination. The question is not, did I enjoy this? But, did this serve the life I am actually trying to live? A leisure that answers yes to that question is not waste. A leisure that cannot answer the question at all, that doesn't even know what question it's being asked. That is the plague Seneca is warning against. Here's where I want to get uncomfortable with you. Respectfully, honestly, in the way a friend does when they care more about you than about being liked. Seneca's 3 categories, the busy, the postponer, the pleasure seeker, are not meant to describe other people. They are meant to describe Tuesday. They are meant to describe the 3 modes your own day cycles through without your full awareness. You wake up and the first thing you reach for is your phone. That's the pleasure seeker. Reaching for stimulation before consciousness has fully arrived. You move through a day full of reactive tasks, responding, accommodating, managing, serving other people's urgent at the expense of your own important. That's the busy. And at the end of the day, when the small window that belongs to you finally opens, when the obligation's clear and a genuine hour of freedom appears, you think, tomorrow I'll use this properly. Tonight I just need to decompress. That's the postponer. And you are all three in a single rotation of the earth. I'm not saying this to shame you. Shame is not Seneca's tool, and it is not mine. I'm saying it because the first requirement of the prescription is an honest diagnosis. And an honest diagnosis requires seeing the pattern clearly, without flinching, before you can change it. The good news, and Seneca, despite his severity, was a man of profound good news, is that the pattern is not you. It is a set of unexamined habits operating on autopilot. And habits, examined and challenged and replaced with deliberate alternatives, can be changed. Not overnight, not by a single act of willpower, by 1,000 small, daily re-elections of a different way of spending the hours you've been given. Now we get to the part that the quotes never include. The part that gets left off the posters. Because everyone knows life is short, Seneca. Very few people know here is exactly what to do about it. Seneca. And that Seneca is extraordinary. His prescription for the wasted life has 4 specific components. And every one of them is as radical today as it was in the 1st century AD. Prescription 1. Guard your time like it's blood, Seneca writes, Ita fac, mi Lucili, Vindica te Tibi. Do this, my Lucilius. Claim yourself for yourself. This is the first and most fundamental move. Not a life hack, not a productivity technique, a philosophical stance. You must decide, with the full weight of conscious deliberate choice, that your time is not a common resource available for general distribution. It is the substance of your life. And the default position toward every claim on it must be suspicion, not accommodation. This is radical in a world that has organized itself entirely around your attention. Every app, every platform, every notification, every headline is engineered by teams of brilliant people whose entire professional purpose is to make the next minute of your attention feel like the only natural place for it to go. They are good at this, extraordinarily good. They have the data, the psychology, the A/B testing, the feedback loops. You have Seneca. And Seneca says, before you give a minute, ask who asked for it and why. Before you say yes to an obligation, ask what you are saying no to. Before you open the next thing, ask whether the last thing served you. These questions feel slow. They feel impractical in a world that moves at the speed of a notification. But the person who never asks them is the person who arrives at the end of their week with no memory of where it went and no understanding of why they feel so hollow. The guard is not built once. It is rebuilt every morning, every hour. It is a practice, a continuous, active, attentive practice of saying, this hour is mine. I am choosing what I do with it. Prescription 2. Compress the past, inhabit the present. Here is the Senecan insight that I think is the most philosophically original and the least understood. He argued that one of the primary reasons people feel they have no time is that they have no relationship with their own past. They don't own their past. They haven't inhabited it. It simply happened to them, and then it slid away, unprocessed, unintegrated, not quite real. And a person who doesn't own their past experiences time as a kind of endless, undifferentiated present, always beginning, never accumulating, always running out. Seneca's prescription was what he called Recogitatio, the deliberate act of returning to your lived experience and making it yours. Not nostalgia, not rumination, a kind of active, appreciative, meaning-making engagement with the life that has already happened. Because here's what Seneca understood that most modern people don't. The past cannot be taken from you. It is the one thing that is permanent. The future is uncertain. The present is fleeting. But the past, your actual lived hours and years and experiences, is yours in a way that nothing else ever will be. Omnia aliena sunt, praeterita nostra. Everything else belongs to others. The past is ours. When you deliberately return to a rich experience, when you sit with it, turn it over, find the meaning in it, integrate it into your understanding of who you are, you effectively extend your life. Not physically, experientially. The person who lives an hour and then processes it, finds what it gave them, carries it forward consciously. That person has more life than the person who lived 10 hours and retained nothing. This is why journaling, real journaling, not venting on paper, but deliberate reflection, is not a self-care trend. It is a Senecan technology for reclaiming time that would otherwise simply evaporate. 10 minutes before you sleep. Review the day. What was real? What mattered? What did you actually feel? What do you want to carry forward? The 10 minutes does not add to your past. It makes your past real. It transforms experience from something that happened to you into something that belongs to you. And a life full of things that belong to you is, experientially, a longer life, a fuller life. That is not a metaphor. That is the mechanism. Prescription 3. Do the thing that requires all of you. Seneca is precise about what constitutes a well-spent hour, and his precision cuts against almost everything the productivity industry tells you. He is not interested in efficiency. He is not interested in optimization. He is interested in engagement. Specifically, the kind of full-bodied, fully present, I am entirely here engagement that most of us experience only rarely, and that many of us have spent years engineering our lives to avoid. Because full engagement is uncomfortable. It requires vulnerability. It requires the possibility of failure. It requires bringing yourself entirely to something with no guarantee of the outcome. Half engagement is safe. You can always say you didn't really try. You can always scroll away when the discomfort rises. You can always reserve a part of yourself as insurance against the humiliation of full commitment. But Seneca says, a life of half engagement is not a life at all. It is the longest possible rehearsal for a performance you never give. The thing that requires all of you. The work you've been approaching sideways, the relationship you've been holding at arm's length, the creative act you've been planning to begin when the conditions are perfect. That is where the life is. Not in the outcome. In the being there fully. Every hour you spend entirely present, entirely committed, entirely engaged, bringing your whole self to what is in front of you. That hour cannot be wasted, by definition. It is impossible to waste an hour of full presence. And every hour spent in the half-life of divided attention, one eye on the screen and one eye somewhere else, that hour is gone before it began. Prescription 4. Spend time with people who are alive. This is Seneca's most socially uncomfortable prescription, and also his most important. He writes that we should be selective, ruthlessly, unapologetically selective about the people whose company we keep. Not because some people are better than others, but because time spent with the wrong people does something specific and terrible. It teaches you to value what they value. And if they value distraction over depth, complaint over creation, comfort over growth, you will slowly, without noticing, begin to value those things too. Seneca's prescription: seek out the company of the viventes, the genuinely alive, the people who are building something, the people who are engaged with ideas, the people who have a real relationship with time and do not spend every conversation complaining about its passage. You do not need many of them. One will do. A single person who is genuinely, fully, courageously alive is worth 100 pleasant companions who are merely passing the time together. And in the absence of such a person in your physical life, in the absence of access to a living mentor or a community of the genuinely engaged, the great dead will do. Seneca himself. Here, available 2,000 years on, more alive in a single page than most people you will meet this week. Read the people who were fully alive. Let them set the standard. Let them adjust what you find acceptable for yourself. That is not escapism. That is the most practical form of self-education available. I want to end with something practical, something you can do today. Not a system, not a program. 1 hour. Seneca believed that the reclamation of a life did not require a dramatic overhaul. It did not require quitting your job or moving to a mountain or dismantling everything you'd built. It required 1 honest hour. 1 hour per day, 1 single hour, given entirely to the things that constitute your actual life. Not the obligations, not the productivity, not the performance of busyness or the consumption of entertainment. The thing that makes you feel most like yourself. The work you would do if no one was watching and nothing was at stake. The relationship that deserves your best attention. The question you've been carrying for years that you've never given real time to. The physical practice that makes your body remember it's alive. The creative act that scares you precisely because it matters. 1 hour, daily, protected, not perfect, not optimized, not measured, just real, just yours, just present. If you do nothing else from this video, if you carry nothing else forward from Seneca's 2,000 years of waiting to be heard, carry that. Because here is what Seneca promises, and what I can confirm from the other side of having actually tried it. When you give 1 honest hour a day to your real life, something changes in the way the other 23 feel. They don't become perfect. They don't become easy. They don't suddenly fill with meaning. But the hollowness goes. The specific, nagging, low-grade grief of unlived days, that goes. Because you know, in the body, in the bones, in the place beneath justification and narrative, you know that today, you were present for some portion of your own existence. And that knowledge is not small. That knowledge is, for Seneca, the whole point. Here is the thing about Seneca that I find most extraordinary. He was not a saint. He was not a man who had perfectly solved the problem he was writing about. He was immensely wealthy while writing about the dangers of wealth. He was deeply embedded in the court of an increasingly dangerous emperor while writing about the importance of freedom. He was busy, endlessly, consequentially busy, while writing about the tragedy of busyness. He knew this. He addressed it directly. He wrote, and this might be the most honest line in all of ancient philosophy, I am not yet in the condition I describe. I have not achieved the wisdom I recommend. I write this not as a teacher to a student, but as a patient to a fellow patient. We are sick with the same disease, and I am sharing what I have found. 2,000 years ago, a man who was struggling with exactly what you are struggling with, who did not have an algorithm feeding him distraction, who did not have a smartphone or a streaming platform or a social media feed, who had none of the specific instruments of modern waste, and who was still fighting for the hours of his own life. Because the fight was never about the technology. The technology is just the current costume worn by a problem as old as human consciousness. The problem of being alive and not quite inhabiting it. The problem of time that passes without our full participation. The problem of the life we are living and the life we meant to live, running on parallel tracks that never quite meet. Seneca wrote his warning for himself. But it survived 2,000 years because it was always, really, for you. The question he leaves you with, the only question, is the same one he asked himself every night in the first century of a young civilization, still figuring out what human life was for. Of all the days I've been given, of all the hours I will never get back, what did I actually do with today? Answer it honestly. Then tomorrow, answer it better. That is the whole prescription. That is the Senecan life. That is the antidote to the warning he wrote when no one was watching and sent 2,000 years into the future. To you. Before this video closes, I want you to do one thing. In the comments below, finish this sentence. One honest sentence. The hour I keep postponing but know I need to protect is blank. Not for me, for you. Because the moment you name it publicly, the moment it leaves the vague interior fog and becomes a specific, stated intention, it changes. It becomes real in a different way. The people watching this channel are the people who are done with surface-level content, who are hungry for something with actual weight. And when you put your answer in that comment, you're joining a community of people who are serious about this work. Hit subscribe if you haven't. This is where we go deep, not for views, not for the algorithm, but because the ideas that have survived 2,000 years of human civilization probably deserve more than a 30-second reel. And if you want the full Stoic framework, the complete system for protecting your time, building your mind, and becoming the person Seneca was describing, that video is right here. Seneca wrote the letter. Now it's your turn to read it properly.